All right, welcome to another episode of the Sioux City Show. Before we get into the episode, I kind of want to introduce it. Obviously, we're doing things a little different with the quarantine going on, and I've kind of been taking a break from these while everything's going on and heating up. I didn't want to put any weird information out there that had nothing to do with the times we're living in. So I was able to get a guest who I think is going to be able to be a great source of information and a great source of insight on everything that's going on right now. I brought on my business partner, Brad Lepper, who owns Stone Brew in Sioux City, and he was able to offer a business owner's perspective on everything going on. But even more importantly, we brought on his father-in-law, Dr. Scott Taylor, who, among his many accomplishments, I have his entire CV right here, right now. He, got his doctorate in veterinary medicine from Iowa State University, got his undergrad in biology and chemistry. He did graduate studies in immunology, analysis of vaccines, biologics, veterinary biologics. He's the founder and owner of Applied Botanicals, Inc. He authored 3 books on health and nutrition, specializing in prevention and mitigation of inflammation and disease. He's a top-tier expert on everything that we're dealing with right now, and I hope that having a single source of information that's not filtered through any type of media bias that that I know that we're getting all types of conflicting information out right now. I hope that this is going to be able to shed some light on what we should really be concerned about and what are the real issues facing us right now. And with that being said, it is phone call. It was a video chat. So while it's going on, I have my dog here and my cat here. It's not going to be top tier quality like we've been putting out on the Sioux City Show, but I think that this is really important information, and I hope you like it. So let's get in the episode. Welcome back to the Sioux City Show. My name is Taylor Grote. We have a special one today, a remote podcast. We're all on lockdown for the coronavirus, and today we have an expert with us, at least the biggest expert we can get on the show. His name is Scott, and he was formerly with the USDA Laboratory for Infectious Diseases. I'm sure I'm butchering this, but I'll let him introduce himself. Go ahead, Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Taylor, a veterinarian. Worked in Ames. We have a large campus here in USDA. It's the National Center for Animal Health. That's what it's called right now. And I've worked there. I'm retired from there. I've worked 32 years at the center. We did animal research, and I worked in a center called the Center for Veterinary Biologics, which is the agency within USDA that regulates vaccines that are used in animals. So that's kind of my background there. I graduated from Iowa State, veterinary medicine, and went to graduate school and studied immunology there also. So that's kind of my area of expertise is immunology and virology.
I should also add to this, on the call also we have my business partner, Brad Lepper, who is a real estate tycoon, a coffee shop mogul, and my business partner in Honeywave Media. And he is also, he's Scott's son-in-law, so he can also provide, a little bit of insight on like what it's like being a local business owner during these times. So, Brad, go ahead and introduce yourself too.
Yeah, I'm Brad Lepper from here in Sioux City. And Scott, I've known Scott now for over a decade. And he was the guy that called me back in early January and told me that we should keep an eye on this virus that's circulating in China. And so thanks to him, I think I laughed at him originally. Sorry about that, Scott. I was like, well, why is this any different from SARS or Ebola or anything else? This isn't ever going to come here. And Scott was like, no, this one's different. This one could get bad. And so we kind of were a team investigating this from that point on. And it's been very helpful to have somebody who specializes in microbiology, immunology, and all of that to bounce ideas off of and kind of give me that BS test on whether something is legit or not.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
You had healthy skepticism, but it didn't last long, and you started doing some research. So thankfully, we have a good relationship, and you trust my judgment, and vice versa. So that was an interesting start to this whole journey, isn't it?
So,
Absolutely.
Scott, when it was all starting at the beginning, what were the things that were like jumping out at you that made you say this is something we should keep an eye on?
Well, first of all, it's a new novel virus. They call them novel viruses, and it came from China, which is kind of a notoriously, if you look back at history, a lot of bad pandemics have come from China, and they have this a unique interface between animals and humans, and so it's generally over history, over the centuries, it's been a hotbed of pandemics. That's where a lot of Yersinia pestis, which is the Black Plague, came from there way back in I think the 1700s. So it's that in itself is bad. And then it's a RNA virus, which we can talk about a little bit later, which is a little tougher to deal with than some of the other viruses. Like I said, it was new, it's novel, meaning that everybody, all the population of this, the whole world is naive to it, meaning that our immune system has never seen this, meaning that we're all susceptible to the disease and to the virus itself, to the infection. So that, and then another big kicker was early on, when we discovered that it could be transmitted between humans, so human transmission. That was the key. That was really an eye opener, and because we've had other viruses from China that have been very deadly, but they're not very infectious and wouldn't spread from human to human very well, if at all. So the fact that it was new, it came from China, it's very contagious, it's spread human to human. Those things started adding up to really be high on my radar and send off some flags of concern.
And Brad, I know, like, just working in the office, you were kind of an early warning sign for everybody around me, certainly, that like you took it very seriously as soon as you were getting information from Scott. So how did that affect your decisions going into like preparing Stone Brew for getting ready for the coronavirus? And I know that you were kind of an early actor on making sure that your employees were safe and taken care of.
Yeah, I think from watching it and what was happening as it spread from China, and seeing how other countries were responding, I think just saw the gravity of the situation. When you were seeing cities of 12 million people that were on lockdown, and when you were seeing entire countries and regions, I think that was one of the biggest things, was seeing how many people were quarantined by the millions that I've never seen in my lifetime, and I don't think has ever happened. So seeing that going on, paying attention more to what governments and decision makers were doing versus what they were saying early on was helpful.
Yeah, I'd say like, Brad, I think you might have frozen up there. I don't know if you can still hear us or not.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yep. I was going to say, yeah, he's basically reinforcing you don't listen to what those government officials were saying from China, but you watch what they do. And they were taking unprecedented actions, which indicated that they were a lot more
we're actually here.
They're a lot more concerned about this virus than what they were saying officially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they were being very misleading and covering up what was actually going on, but their actions were exposing what was really happening on the ground.
Yeah, and it kind of opens your eyes, in a country that has over 1 million ethnic Uyghurs in concentration camps right now. It's like, well, we got to take their coronavirus actions pretty seriously, but maybe we shouldn't start rounding up the ethnic Muslims in the United States and putting them into concentration camps. You really got to pick and choose with that country what you're going to follow, because they are really off the wall in all their actions. But I took high school chemistry twice because I failed it the first time. So I am the furthest thing from even a novice of what like the RNA, the DNA, the science of why this is different. I really I can't even begin to understand that. So do you kind of have like explain it like I'm 5 version of why this is different on a molecular level?
Yeah, the viruses can be broken down into 2 groups, and based on their genetic coding information that's built inside the cell or inside the virus itself, RNA or DNA, and those are our genetic codes. RNA viruses are notorious for being troubles, especially for causing disease. Influenza is an RNA virus. Our coronaviruses, obviously, which this one is a problem. The rhinoviruses, viruses that are RNA viruses are hard to produce vaccines for that are effective, and that's one of the main problems. The other problem is the RNA is an unstable molecule compared to the DNA code, and so when they go through what we call translation and transcription, meaning when they're copied and used as a template, they're not very robust, and they make a lot of mistakes as they're copied, and those mistakes can change the virus over time, and they're dynamic, and that causes problems for vaccines, and it also causes problems for those of us that are infected, because our immune system doesn't recognize the change, and so they can be virulent again and cause disease again, even though we've been exposed to a different variety or strain of that same virus.
So when you use words like change or like transcriptions, I guess a word that gets thrown around a lot in the media is mutations. Is that kind of the same thing that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yep. They're dynamic, and so they can mutate and change over time. So their actual DNA, or in this case RNA backbone structure, is able to change because it's unstable.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes what starts to be some sense for me. So I appreciate that. Yep. And Brad, I'm sorry, you got cut off earlier. Your connection kind of cut out, but you were talking about, taking care of employees and trying to figure out as a business owner how to make sure that you're taking care of your employees and their health in the best way possible, while also being realistic. And now that we're seeing like the Small Business Association says that they're all tapped out of funds and nothing else is coming to small business owners. So how does that balance of, keeping a business alive, making sure that you still have a job to give somebody when they're back from this, and meanwhile keeping your workers healthy? How does that balance all look like for you?
Well, I think, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. So I think the priority has to be the health of your employees and of your customers. And so watching this from the very beginning, realizing how dangerous it was, I think that was the thing that made me want to say, hey, let's close here. Let's get a grip on what's going on, because the testing, especially here in Iowa, was so poor early on that we had no idea who was infected and who wasn't. Well, we knew people who were showing symptoms that could have been positive and would go or call the doctor, and they say, oh, well, you haven't had contact with a known case and you haven't traveled, so we can't test you. And so we were just flying blind. And so once I started to hear of people that I knew personally that had symptoms and were not able to be tested, that was the kind of the moment. It's like, well, we need to close until we know what's going on. And since then, we closed on the 23rd of March originally. And since then, I found out of some customers who are very regular that come into our store almost daily, who have shown up to be positive. So if we would have stayed open even a matter of 3 to 4 days more, I can guarantee we would have had positive cases interacting with our employees and coming in and out of our stores. So I feel like we got lucky or blessed that we closed when we did. I think the biggest thing was health and safety of the staff and our customers. And once we had that taken care of, then making sure they're taken care of financially. And at that point in time, the unemployment was set up and the CARES Act was getting ready to be passed. So I was fairly confident that our employees were going to be taken care of financially, even if we closed. So it was kind of a mix of those two things, both their physical health as well as their financial health. But once I knew that the best decision was to close, we took action.
Yeah, and I'd say, I guess, from my viewpoint and being, kind of a close in the whole process with you as you were going through it, I really felt like it was a master class in like putting your employees and customers first and worrying about the bills and the overhead later. And just for anybody listening, like it was pretty impressive the way you made the decisions based on health and health alone. It seemed like right off the bat, and we're able to regroup. And now you have your Gordon Drive drive-through location open, and it's really nice balance in between figuring out what's going on, taking the right steps, and then taking a measured response to like start rolling back out the business side of things. And speaking of that,
thanks.
So Scott, as a guy who recognized the warning signs early on and, had some, I'm sure you had thoughts and ideas about what the United States should be doing in response to that. What do you see, like, as of today? What is the right response going forward? And this is in your opinion. It's nothing anybody's going to hold you to. Disclaimer. That I guess I was just thinking about this morning is, we kind of started shutting things down when there was like 50 confirmed cases in Iowa. And now people are starting to say, well, let's open things up on May 1st. And it's like, well, there's, whatever, a couple thousand cases of confirmed cases in Iowa. So if we let everybody roll things back out, then isn't that much worse than the position we started off in? And what does the long term look like as far as like getting back to hopefully some semblance of normality?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there. And I'd go back to the initial testing, and that was a problem. The fact that we couldn't test was quite a failure on our CDC's and FDA's part. That set us back quite a ways. Now, I will say I think we took some good action by cutting, banning air travel from China fairly early, and also from Europe. I think those were good actions that we took. But the fact that we didn't have good testing early and really aggressive testing to understand what was going on, that set us back quite a while. And then backing up even further than that, the misinformation that came from China and our WHO especially, that really put us behind the 8 ball on the whole story about this.
And an interesting thing with that, Scott, is you talk about shutting off air travel. So we shut off air travel to China, and the WHO and China were both mad. Meanwhile, they had closed off Wuhan within their own country. So they had quarantined Wuhan, but were continuing to fly international flights in and out of Wuhan, even after they had quarantined it from the rest of the country. So that went to show that they were not acting in good faith early on, that they weren't risking people from Wuhan traveling to the province next door, but they were willing to put them on international flights.
Yeah, not only good faith, you begin to wonder if they weren't malevolent and actually wanting it to spread worldwide. So others had to deal with it too. It's that history is yet to be written, but there's a lot of investigations that need to discover what's really happening there. And we know Taiwan notified the WHO late in December that it was human transmission, and WHO did not notify the world about that.
My dog is in full-on attack dog mode right now. She is great at security and bad at showbiz, so I've been trying to keep my mic muted over here. But I guess regarding like misinformation, I think it's just been incredibly stressful as the average person. Like there is nothing but conflicting information out about it right now. It's like, I don't know if you saw it today that I think it was Mike Pence is saying you shouldn't be wearing, or it's the CDC and relayed by Mike Pence, was saying that you shouldn't be wearing face masks now, and that it's more likely to spread if you're wearing a face mask. And it's like, well, what's going on here? I guess I don't have any even clue where to start getting my information from when it's one thing one day, the WHO is saying one thing, the CDC is saying another. What do you feel about that, Scott? Like, who would be the most reputable source for us to even go to for information?
Yeah, that's a great question. It seems like international officials like the WHO, government officials like China and the United States have not been very reliable. So, and the mainstream media has not been reliable, unfortunately. So that's a challenge for the average American. Where do you go for information, and who do you trust? And that is a challenge. Obviously, thankfully with the internet, there's alternate information sources out there. Unfortunately, you need to know who's telling the truth, who doesn't. So, in my opinion, in my background, I have the advantage, obviously, of understanding what's going on, and I have a good ability to detect manipulations of information than somebody that's a layman that doesn't have a background in virology and immunology like I do. So I get that. So basically, we're drowning in information, but we're starving for actual knowledge and truth and reality in this whole situation.
Yeah, the scary thing is.
And I think.
Oh, go ahead, Brad.
The whole nonsense about masks, that early on the Surgeon General says masks are ineffective, you shouldn't use them, but our medical professionals need them. So, they're not effective for you, but our medical professionals need them. That was such a transparent statement where he would have been way better off to just say, hey, masks are a vital piece of protection equipment that we need for our medical facilities. So please do not hoard them because we're going to need them in our hospitals to protect our frontline workers, versus kind of speaking out of both sides of your mouth, saying they're not effective, but our medical professionals need them. That confused people. And I hadn't heard about Pence or the CDC coming out today saying that face masks are ineffective, because that's nonsense. We know that this travels through the air as well as with touch. That gets into the air through coughs, through sneezes, even through breathing. So even if your mask is homemade, it's better than nothing. So for them to say that they're not effective, it kind of boggles the mind, honestly.
Yeah,
I guess I'd
go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I would go back to one of the characteristics that we looked at early to see if we were concerned about this was how contagious was it. And quickly, the information coming out of China indicated it was extremely contagious. So that's another, characteristic of this virus that put it on its radar and was concerned. So basically, we have this mentality is, we prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And as the story unfolded about this virus, the worst case scenario began to unfold, and that story is kind of where it is today. And that story will continue as we learn more about the characteristics of this virus, which is quite unique.
Yeah, I think that, I mentioned that it's just frustrating to get the conflicting information where like now they come out today and say, whatever, face masks are ineffective. And it's like, well, isn't that the whole point of the 6 feet, the social distancing, what staying away from each other is all the theory of airborne contagion, correct? And yeah, it's just frustrating to hear that. And now it's like, that's what this whole thing, it seems to be based around, is like the biggest tenet is staying away from people. And now is it, I just can't touch things that other people have touched, or,
Yeah. People need to put their reasoning hat on, and when they're thinking about things like that, and don't just assume and take authorities' narrative as the gospel. And common sense goes, and reasoning goes a long way in this case.
I guess also, Scott, is like, long term, maybe 12 months out, looking forward, is finding a vaccine like a feasible idea in the next 6 months, or is it something that maybe in a year or two that we'll have one? Or what do you think, like from a research side of things, what does that actually look like in terms of a projected timeline?
I'd say, 1 year to 18 months there's a potential for a vaccine, but again, the caution there is this is an RNA virus. They don't lend themselves to be very good candidates for vaccines. Because if that was the case, why don't we have a vaccine for the common cold and the other coronaviruses that are out there? We know the influenza vaccines don't work very well. They're not very effective. They're out there and they recommend we use them all the time, but their efficacy is pretty poor. Otherwise, why do so many of us continue to get the virus even after vaccination? So these aren't good candidates for vaccines. So I hope we can come up with one, but I'm cautious about the vaccine. And the other thing is, by the time the vaccine is ready for use, this thing would have already spread pretty much to everybody in the world. So the timing's off.
Do you think that is the most reasonable outcome, or the most likely outcome of this is the kind of like an idea that it's going to be everybody that gets it, and the mitigation of like all of our health and safety concerns between now and then is basically making sure that hospitals are not inundated with one giant wave of everybody who's sick? Or what does it actually look like in a way that's actually feasible for the best possible outcome?
Yeah, I think you can confidently say that we'll all be exposed to this virus eventually. That's just a matter of time, especially as contagious as this is. And that's just kind of a matter of fact. The timing of it is the question, obviously. And yeah, their objective early was, without mitigation, they were concerned that this would overwhelm the medical communities and ability to treat people, and it was going to be devastating. So that's why they were so aggressive with locking down the country, because they didn't have any other mitigation other than doing that, because they didn't know how bad the virus was. They were afraid it overwhelmed our medical communities, which is legitimate. So they had to be pretty aggressive about locking down the country.
I guess I have maybe some questions that we could run through that are what I find to be the most frustrating things that I see constantly shared on the internet, that maybe you can say that's something that's possibly something that we should consider, or that is lunacy. And if any of these are like, outside of your field of expertise that you feel comfortable lending a solid opinion on, don't hesitate to tell me to just skip it. But I
can just make something up.
There you go. You're retired. You don't have a career at stake here. I like it.
That's right.
So the first one is Bill Gates, the philanthropist who has donated billions upon billions of dollars to vaccine research, mostly in the area of malaria, and has arguably saved north of 100 million lives. Is he a greedy capitalist pig who is doing everything involved in vaccine research in order to build his wealth more?
I don't think he's really. There's not that much money in vaccines per se. I don't think he's in for it for the money. I do think he might be into it for his prestige and his significance in the world. I think that's more of a driving force for him. So if he wanted to make money, he would stay in the software business, I think, and the tech business is where there's a lot more money than vaccines. So I don't think it's financial, really. Is he actually doing good with what he's doing right now? I'm not so sure that he is. He gives a lot of money to the WHO, and he's critical for Trump cutting money from the WHO, which I think is unfortunate, because the WHO has been pathetic in their response to this pandemic. And I think cutting funding off and studying what's going on in WHO is quite appropriate.
All right. The next.
And I think hold on. I'll throw in something here. I think that everybody's fear of Bill Gates is they see anybody with a lot of money and think that they're out to get him. And I just don't see that here with Bill Gates. He's given away millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars to try and help people. This thing started in China. It's not like Bill Gates infected people. So I'm not seeing the Bill Gates connection that a lot of people are talking about. So I don't see that either.
Okay. So the other connection is 5G, and 5G towers currently exist in I think 5 countries, and this virus is present in basically every country in the world. Any country who says that they don't have confirmed cases probably doesn't have a healthcare system that's equipped to roll out testing in the way that's acceptable to be able to claim whether or not you do have any confirmed cases. So is 5G towers what is infecting people with the coronavirus?
That's actually a conspiracy theory out there. That's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot
I can flat out tell you that. So you got a technical electronic equipment spewing out a biological virus. That's complete BS. So
Scott?
yeah, let's just wipe that right off the conspiracy.
Brad told me you don't have Facebook, so I'm warning you. There's a lot of idiots out there, far more than you're thinking. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well,
shocking.
That's a theory that you can dump in the trash. Is that no way?
One that I kind of see the quick snap thought process in it, but to me, on a moral level, it just seems asinine. Is the idea that this COVID-19 is only has a 97% survival rate, so we should all just say screw it, get back into public, get back to work. It's only gonna kill 3% of us, without like the idea nor the realization that in America we have 330 million people estimated. So that means that we're comfortable with basically killing off 3 million people off the top. I guess that just seems crazy to me, but is that something that holds any weight to like what might be the solution to all this? Or I guess in your opinion, that's probably more of a just tell me your opinion question rather than a tell me the facts question. But what do you think?
Well, yeah, that's a story that's really not unfolded yet. It's just still getting started. How this virus spreads and the impact that it's going to have globally. So the speed with which we allow it to happen can have a significant effect. So slowing it down was a good thing. That gives us time to study it, to understand mitigating things that work and don't work, testing, and all those type of things. So it was good to try to slow it down. It's not a good idea to let it just go like a wildfire and just devastate the country. That's not appropriate. So, those things that we can mitigate to slow it down, reduce the disease, obviously the outcome of death is important. Now you got to balance that with the destruction of our economy, which is a heck of a challenge. And I get that. So, I kind of wish the authorities would have asked veterinarians how to handle this, because I think we have a good experience in our background about handling populations of animals and such in livestock production, and how to deal with outbreaks better than the human medicine does, because they usually deal with people on an individual basis.
So this might be unrelated, but I can't remember. Maybe 2015 was when all the bird populations in Iowa, like the chickens, were being like absolutely wiped out by some type of pandemic.
Influenza. Yeah, we see our birds are susceptible to influenza. That's usually actually where a lot of the influenza start in birds, and then they move to either pigs and or humans. Yeah. So, the pathogenic influenza is always on our radar. It's always a possibility, because, again, go back to remember what we talked about. The RNA viruses change, and influenza is an RNA virus, and it changes over time. And we're always concerned about a new one emerging and causing, being very pathogenic in not only poultry and swine, but also in other species, including humans. So we have influenza that can infect horses and also dogs. So, yeah.
And I think this is an interesting thing to bring up. I mean, Scott, where you worked in Ames is actually a BSL-4. So that's the top security level biolab, one of them in the country. And so they deal with these things all the time. And I think that's the thing that also helped to maybe put my senses on high alert early on, was Scott helped me to understand the basics of the virus on a biology level. So all of these questions about, is this true or is this not? I think the best lens to look at it through is understanding the virus at a biological level, and understanding that, how does it infect people? What does it do to you once you get it? Because once you understand that, then it's easy to look at something that comes out of the government about face masks and say, this is nonsense, because we know what this virus is. So you really have to focus on understanding the virus before you can really understand the macroeconomic and geopolitical effects. You need to know the virus first.
Yeah, yeah. So our campus in Ames for USDA is the National Center for Animal Health, and it's like the CDC on the animal side. So it's here in Ames, Iowa. So it's a big campus, a large campus. It does diagnostics, it does research, it does regulates vaccines that are used in animals. So it's quite the campus for veterinary medicine.
Scott,
it's our diagnostic lab here in Ames. I'm sure are the ones that diagnosed those cats that are in New York that came down with the virus. So.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Here's a question that might lend itself exactly into your area of expertise. Is that in the last week or so, originally it was like a guy definitely ate a bat at a wet market in Wuhan. And now, in the last couple of days, it's starting to come out that, through reputable sources are reporting that top researchers are saying it probably escaped from a lab, and it's actually a genetically engineered or genetically modified virus that escaped the lab. Does your research background lend itself to you having an opinion one way or the other on what's more likely?
Yeah, I definitely think it's bat related, but that can also be, there's good information showing that laboratory was doing research with bats and those viruses, and the people that were working with them had that background also with coronaviruses. So it looks very suspicious that this is an accidental leak from that laboratory and not from the wet market.
Brad,
I would say there's more evidence to show that it's coming from the lab than there is evidence saying it's coming from the wet market, where I believe they've interviewed roughly 60 people that did business at that wet market, and all of them deny that there were horseshoe bats sold within that wet market. The index case, or the original case that was found, had never even been to that wet market or had contact with anybody there. And also the species of bat that this virus comes from is the horseshoe bat, which the closest colony of horseshoe bats is 900 kilometers away. And they're not being sold in that wet market. Yeah. And the horseshoe bats are the bats that the Wuhan infectious disease lab, or whatever it was called, that's the bat they were doing studies on, specifically on coronaviruses. So when you start to dig into the details, the whole idea that this came from the wet market becomes more absurd, and the likelihood that it leaked from the lab is more and more obvious.
Well, the other tell is the government official communist government narrative, which is to promote the idea it came from the wet lab or the United States military, whichever you want to believe. So they're trying to downplay and cover up the fact that it leaked from their laboratory.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I guess I one of my clients that I spend a lot of time with, that we have, plenty of time to just kind of shoot the shit. She told me one time she studied abroad in Russia right after the fall of the Soviet Union. And she has told me that she was kind of complaining to another student there about how awful the propaganda is in Russia. And he was like, yeah, but the difference is in Russia, we know that everything the government's telling us is a version of the truth. It's all propaganda. But in America, you guys haven't really figured that out yet. And I guess over the last couple of weeks, I'm seeing that more and more. What is this? Everything has a political slant to it one way or the other. And it's just it's so frustrating for me to see what could be a potential treatment for this to be politicized. Now it's apparently red states are willing to use the hydrochloroquine, I think. Hydroxychloroquine. And then blue states are like, no, that's a evil capitalist play by Trump to just line his pockets. And it's the truth has to lie somewhere in the middle on all of this stuff, right? And I guess it's just, do you have any thoughts on what the truth of the matter? I guess we've already kind of been over this on who to look at, but it's just you say look at alternative news sources. Well, that's what turns people down the path of thinking that Bill Gates is the global conspirator behind all this, and it's just a big play by the New World Order, and it's all a billionaire cabal conspiracy to make all of us stay at home so they can infect us or whatever. And I guess I'm just kind of off on a rant here, but I don't want to lead this too much down a weird lane. So, Brad, do you have anything else that you think would be important to get from Scott?
Well, I think the hydroxychloroquine is a big deal. We're seeing incredible results coming from that. And Scott, you really can dive into how it works versus just saying that it works. And the way that it functions with the cell is really important. And also what it's being paired with, where it's not just hydroxychloroquine and you're good. It's hydroxychloroquine plus zithromycin plus zinc in many circumstances. Scott, do you want to break down why you think that it's being effective?
Yeah, I'll announce here today there is a hack. There's a hack for this virus. Are you listening, Taylor?
I'm listening. I've never been listening more.
Okay. There's actually a hack for this virus, and it's zinc. It's the mineral zinc. You've all heard of that metal, the zinc. Zinc's important in this, and that's the hack. The reason zinc is a hack is because it has the ability to do two things that are important. There's an enzyme that this virus uses to replicate in our cells, and it's a replicase enzyme. And zinc actually can inhibit that enzyme. And it does that intracellularly, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So this zinc can actually inhibit the replication of this virus, which is critically important, obviously. The second thing is zinc has the ability to mitigate inflammation, and that's why people that have lupus and rheumatoid arthritis use a drug like hydroxychloroquine because it allows zinc to take its action and control inflammation. So this virus replicates within our cells, triggering inflammation, and inflammation is the cause of all the diseases caused from this virus. And hydroxychloroquine is important in that regard because it allows zinc to transfer from outside the cell to inside the cell where this action can take place. So once it enters the cell, zinc can inhibit the replicase enzyme, stop the production of the virus, and also help control the inflammation that's triggered or caused by the virus itself. So that's the hack that we know about when it comes to this virus right now.
I feel like I have some peace of mind after hearing that. I like that. Zinc.
Well, and Scott, do you want to dive into there's actually a natural version that does something similar? What's the word that hydroxychloroquine, where what is it called when it?
It's an ionophore, yeah. So the ionophore, a zinc ionophore is. Let me back up just a minute. Explain. Zinc can't cross the cell membrane very well, so it stays outside. It tries to transfer from the outside to the inside, but it's a double charged. It has a double positive charge on the outside of the molecule, so it doesn't transfer across the membrane very well. So it's blocked from going inside the cell and doing its action. So hydroxychloroquine and another natural compound called quercetin, which is a bioflavonoid found in several foods and also in dietary supplements. They're ionophores, and what they do is they help transfer zinc from outside of the cell to inside the cell. So they call it a zinc ionophore or an ionophore. It's almost like you can think of a channel that opens up and allows zinc to enter inside the cell. And then once it's entered inside the cell, it can do two important things: stop the replication of the virus and mitigate the inflammation that's triggered by the virus. So preventing the disease in two important ways.
This might be along those same lines. And it's another one of those things that I feel like all of the research that I've kind of seen and the statements that I've seen have been made by scientists saying one thing and then like kind of shrugging their shoulders and like, we don't know. And that's the blood type differences in the way people are affected. Like I'm type O positive. So they're saying like that's the one that has the least reaction to it. It's the least deadly for type O positive, and if you're type A, it's you're in trouble. So it is, I guess, from a scientific background, is there a hard and fast reason why different blood types would have more of a risk in terms of reaction to infection?
I'm not a specialist in that regards, but I don't put much weight and concern and thought into it. To me, it's not very important at this point. I will tell you another important piece of information about this. Here's a theory I have that I just came up with this last week. So we know two people are of high susceptibility or high predilection for this virus. Two people that are predisposed, and those are diabetics, pre-diabetics, and elderly. So people, they say obese, not necessarily because they're obese, but it's because they're diabetic. The interesting thing is that those two categories of people that are older, people that have diabetes, are also tend to be deficient in zinc. So here's another piece of news that's being broken right now. Is my theory is what predisposes people to this virus is zinc deficiencies, because we understand more of the pathology and how it causes disease and how zinc actually helps fight that. And if people are deficient in zinc, they're gonna have a harder time battling this infection and controlling the inflammation from it. Now, I don't know if that is the only predisposition and explains most of why these two groups of people are susceptible. We'll find that out later. But from what I understand right now, how zinc plays a significant role in the pathology, what we call pathogenesis of this virus, I believe that's a potential problem that we have. So the easy thing is to mitigate that is obviously to get people on zinc supplements, and also try to use an ionophore. And these things need to be used prophylactically, meaning that before you get disease, not as a mitigating treatment. Now, mitigating treatment we can talk about later, but prophylactically, everybody should be taking ionophore like quercetin and zinc, so they can mitigate that susceptibility that diabetics and elderly have.
And I guess, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say that there's studies now just getting started about using hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic, as a preventative, not just as a treatment.
I guess a question that I have for you, and this kind of relates to what you just said, as well as what you said earlier, is you mentioned that inflammation is where we really find a lot of the problems arise from inflammation when you're infected. And I guess I'm a big listener to Joe Rogan, and I don't think that he is the end all be all for medical advice, but I think he does a good job of bringing on different medical experts to provide different opinions. And one of the experts that he had on, I think it was Dr. Rhonda Patrick, was kind of sounding alarm bells about like 90% of the things that are wrong with health are caused by inflammation, and inflammation is by and large caused by like simple unrefined sugars or refined sugars, carbohydrates in general cause increased inflammation. And I guess maybe with like diabetics, where you say that they're at an increased risk, does that have any type of correlation, like inflammation in general and like your normal life and then being infected, or is just the inflammation as a result of the infection what you have to be worried about?
Well, yeah, I guess in my credentials I should explain that I've been working in that area for decades. I actually have written 3 books on inflammation and inflammatory syndrome, and based on nutrition and how to mitigate the cause of disease by obviously reducing inflammation, mitigating inflammation, preventing the triggers of inflammation. So we do know sugar is a trigger of inflammation. So yeah, that's right in line with this. But these biological pathogens are extremely potent at triggering inflammation and causing disease. So, this is most disease always comes from inflammation. And the key is, what's the trigger? Try to avoid the triggers. And once a trigger is exposed and inflammation begins, how to mitigate and control that to prevent disease from happening.
I'm glad that the inflammation and sugar argument holds water, because Brad can attest to it. I've had gout since I was 18, and like I can literally tell like the difference in my diet for like the last couple weeks. Well, if I've been just going hard on the sugar and eating whatever the hell I want, I like can hardly walk for a couple weeks straight. And if I keep my diet super clean, just meat and vegetables, drinking water, black coffee, no problems ever. So I'm glad that it's not just all in my head, and there's actually some science behind it, and a scientist has backed it up now.
I just read something where uric acid is reduced significantly, and I'm trying to remember, is it from quercetin? It might be, but we'll stay in touch about that.
I like it. Brad, is there anything else? I mean, we're getting up to the 45-minute mark here, so I don't want to keep this dragging on for too long. I just want to make sure that we got all the information in here that's really pertinent to the audience to hear and kind of go forward with for their own research and I guess information for their life.
I was going to say, if we have a few minutes, we should talk about treatment.
Love it.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say too. Is I would say, in a lot of ways, I'm more optimistic today, Taylor, than back when we were working in the office in the early stages of this. Because back in the early stages, we didn't know of any therapeutics or any way to really slow this down or help people who were sick. And we have multiple ways that are coming out now of being able to help people and even be able to keep people from getting sick. So there's good optimism that we'll be able to get this under control. But I think we have to be looking at ways to slow the spread down through just social issues, whether it's wearing masks, washing hands, social distancing, keeping not doing unessential things where you're around people. I think that's huge. Keeping your social circle tight, not going to parties, not doing those things that you don't have to. So that's important. And also understanding that we're not out of the woods per se on that everybody's just going to get this once. That we're seeing signs coming out of Korea, multiple places, that either people are susceptible to reinfection and or the virus is going dormant and they are testing negative, and then the virus is being reactivated and they're positive again. So both of those things, I think, tell us that the antibodies that our bodies are creating are not perfect shields in stopping this from ever reemerging. So these therapeutics and prophylactics, I think, are really important for us being able to come out of this and get back to some realm of normal life. Scott, what do you? We've talked quite a bit about this. What do you have to say?
Yeah, well, another thing that's important for the listeners, the audience, to know is that if you get this virus, and especially if you get a serious case of it, there can be lifelong permanent damage caused by this virus. Unlike the flu, which normally you recover and it's cleared and you don't have any sequela or following problems with it, this virus can cause permanent lung damage, heart damage, neurological damage, liver damage, kidney damage. It can be devastating in serious cases that have long, lingering, lifelong problems. So that's significantly different than what we'd see with influenza.
That is at least, I guess, like the idea of having a potential treatment that's not just like, okay, I'm in the hospital, I'm gonna die, treat me kind of deal, and having the possibility of being able to treat it, on your own, or even, prophylactically, which I like that word.
I would say, Taylor, like locally, I think we're just coming into it here. I don't know if you saw the news that 16 new cases were announced in Dakota County today. 4 additional cases in Woodbury County. I think this is our testing is either just catching up and or the virus is really just starting to hit here. My personal opinion is I think it's more we're just starting to identify the cases with proper testing. But
Yeah.
locally, we really need to not get laxed or think that we're out of the woods because our media may be coming from harder hit areas like New York or LA that have had the virus longer and are maybe at different points on the curve, that we're early here and this is just starting. So people need to be very careful. People need to continue to take precautions. And there's going to be a big push trying to say that this virus isn't that bad because look at the amount of cases that we have now. And they said it was going to be way worse. And I think we have to keep in mind the level of mitigation that was taken to slow this down. We shut down the number world economy in the world. We told people to stay home. We closed businesses. There wasn't March Madness this year. There's no MLB. Like all of these things that are going on were major, unprecedented steps to slow it down and flatten the curve. And they have been effective so far. So we shouldn't take lower numbers as a piece of evidence to say, well, this isn't that bad, as much as to say that the actions that we're taking, whether it's social distancing or the therapeutics that we're trying in test cases, like South Dakota's doing the hydroxychloroquine clinical trial. I know they've been using it in Chicago. They've been using it in New York. That these are major, major factors in keeping the case counts lower and also keeping the death toll lower. And so we don't want to get lax. We want to kind of keep on our toes, stay hopeful, stay optimistic, but also stay aware.
Yeah, and I'd give a hat tip to Kristi Noem in South Dakota. She's a great governor and taking very good leadership throughout this whole thing. And hydroxychloroquine, that was a brave move, and I think it's going to turn out to be smart and work well for them. And she's looking at using it prophylactically, that's a key to this disease. Is you don't want to wait till you get serious. And unfortunately, some doctors have waited, maybe because the supply of hydroxychloroquine or whatever, but they waited till patients get serious, they're intubated. Well, by that time, there's so much damage, and your chance of treating them and having a successful treatment is not very good. You want to attack this with treatment early in the disease process to mitigate it. You don't want to wait. So the idea is you want to keep people out of clinics. You want to keep people out of hospitals. You want to treat them remotely so that they're not exposed to it and expose other people. And the treatment will be much more successful when started early and or as prophylactic.
Definitely. And I guess just one thing that I like to always think of is, damn, there's a guy out there who's got it really bad because of a very specific situation right now. It's like, I guess, for example, like when I turned 23, the night before, I was woken up in the middle of the night. I was supposed to be going to Afghanistan like 2 days. They woke me up in the middle of the night, said, you got to get on a plane right now. It got moved up. So I went to Afghanistan, went through all the unprocessing, all that kind of stuff, went back to bed. And then I woke up the next day and I was like, oh, dang, yesterday was my birthday. And I didn't even think about it once in the day. And I really like the idea of somewhere out there was a guy who was in prison for 30 years and, was finally got out of prison. And that was 2 days before the government was basically nobody can leave the house. No bars can be open. No restaurants can be open. Imagine being that guy right now who's sitting at home in his halfway house going, damn, this is not what I was looking forward to. And he's looking at his watch going, how much longer do I have of this before I can go to a bar that I've been looking forward to for the last 30 years? That poor man.
At least he's used to it, though. We're not well adjusted to the staying home and not being around people. It's tough. I've been with our new store going down at Sunnybrook. I'm meeting professionals and contractors and people down there, and we're still trying to do work. And you walk up to somebody that you're just meeting, and it's such a strong urge to put your hand out to shake somebody's hand. And when neither one of you do it, that kind of awkwardness that sits between you it's big. So it's just a whole new way of life that we're going to have to get used to for a little while here.
One more thing I think the audience should know, and that is the exposure and infection of this virus is not set, meaning that there's different exposures and different challenges you can get with this virus, meaning if you're exposed to a minimum amount of virus or dose that you become infected with, will usually lead to a mild infection, unless maybe you're a predisposed individual. But the opposite is true. So if you have a overwhelming challenge with a lot of virus from somebody that's expressing and shedding a lot of virus, and or numerous times from an individual or a group of individuals over a length of period of time, it increases your chance of having a significant infection shed to you or received by you. And we call that a dose. So if you get a lot of virus dose, depending on the concentration from somebody else or a number of people over a longer length of time, giving you a large challenge dose of this virus, your case is most likely going to be a lot more serious. So the idea is you want to prevent time and exposure with somebody that's spreading the virus, and minimize the amount of virus you can get from them. So that's why masks help. That's why distancing helps. And that's why these other things we talk about mitigating helps, taking zinc and all those other things. And when you add all those up, not one of those things by themselves may prevent you from getting this virus and having disease. But if you add them all up, it gives you a kind of a shotgun effect, a number of things that you're doing to prevent from becoming infected and suffering from this disease. So that's an approach that usually you take in a biological system.
That's extremely helpful. I think that's the first time I've heard somebody say that like exposure, the intensity of exposure actually does have an effect on the intensity of, I guess, the virus for yourself. Thanks.
Yeah, Taylor, that's a good way to say it. The intensity of exposure. See, I use dose because of my background, but the intensity of the exposure and the length of time that you have that exposure, those two things together can have a significant impact on the outcome of the disease that you'll end up with.
And I think the anecdotal evidence that's proving that point is the doctors that are dying of this, that are otherwise healthy, young, that they are getting high doses and exposure, and they are getting very severe cases. Same thing with doctors, nurses. So super important that we try and protect them as much as possible, finding ways to find them PPE, and hopefully that's another thing, is keeping them from being overwhelmed. Because if we're in there, like what we saw in Italy and what we're seeing in the UK and other areas where doctors are working 18-hour shifts and going home and sleeping for 4 hours, if at all, and then going right back in for another 18 hours, their immune systems are going to be compromised and are going to make them even more susceptible. So, nobody appreciates the fact that this sucks for business more than me. I fully understand this sucks, but we have to remember that you have to have healthy human beings before you can have a healthy economy. And we know enough about this to say this is what we need to do to stay healthy. We just gotta grow up and deal with this and get through to the other side with as little damage as possible, and protect our communities and our health professionals.
Yeah, I'd agree. And my opinion, I think, and hats off to Christy Noem, I think she's wanting to do this, is to treat the medical staff with hydroxychloroquine as a preventative, and that's, to me, that's a great call, and it's the appropriate action to take.
Well, I certainly don't have anything to add to all of the great information that we've been, I guess, given here by you, Scott. I really appreciate you taking your time out to do this. I know that you're retired, and I think that Maury Povich is on right now. So I know that it's extremely nice for you to take time out of that.
Day.
Yeah. So
Taylor, one thing I want to say to wrap this up is advice for local business people. So make sure you're staying in contact with your bankers. Make sure you're staying in contact with your landlords, your vendors. Don't think that that you're just on your own in this. The community has been great, and whether it's bankers or landlords, they've all been great to work with. So reach out to those people from a financial perspective, from a health perspective. Just know that exchanging money is a easy way to come in contact or to possibly expose somebody. So whether it's credit cards or money or meeting somebody face to face to conduct business. So do anything that you can to try and either reduce having to actually have that exchange of an object or a fomite, to use a medical term, back and forth. Or if you do have to exchange money or credit cards like we do at our Gordon Drive store with the drive-through, we have it set up where our cashiers are wearing gloves, and then they're dipping their gloves in sanitizing Sani solution after every exchange back and forth. So that's allowing us to ensure that when we're handing them a cup of coffee, it's not infected from somebody else's money that was in line, 5 people before them, and protects everybody from then on throughout the rest of the day. So I would say wear masks, have your employees wear masks, and also if you have gloves, have them wear gloves. And if they're coming in contact with customers, sanitizing, finding some way to sanitize between interactions is super, super important.
Well, good information. That is good information. Scott, you got anything to wrap up?
Yep. I'll say one thing. Everybody's kind of wishing, for everything to go back to normal. And I'm pretty confident going back to normal is not going to happen. Going forward, there will be a new normal, not the old normal.
I look forward to seeing what that is. I have faith in Americans in general, but I think that people in Sioux City and people in Iowa in general are a little bit better than the average American. So I have extra faith in us. So I really appreciate you both taking time out of your day to do this. I really appreciate anybody who's still holding in here for the podcast, and I hope that you guys all learned something that you'll be able to apply and into your daily life and shut some dummies down on Facebook when they're given stupid information. And I guess if nothing else, until next time, this has been the Sioux City Show. Sioux City Show. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.